Back when I wrote Deep Medicine, I thought our biggest thing in AI was going to be to relieve the data clerk burden of doctors, give patients more autonomy, get us the gift of time, and bring humanity back to medicine. I think that's starting to happen. But I think what's even bigger to me, much bigger, is that we have this newfound capacity to prevent these major age-related diseases. So instead of all this work that's being done to reverse aging, let's just accept aging, but don't accept that these diseases are obligatory part of aging, because they don't have to be.
Welcome to How I Doctor, where we're bringing joy back to medicine. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Eric Topol, cardiologist, founder of Scripps Research Translational Institute, and one of the most cited medical researchers in the world. He's the author of some of my favorite books, including 2019's Deep Medicine, talking about AI, and the brand new bestseller, Super Agers. I think a lot of Dr. Topol's research has directly impacted my own specialty of emergency medicine, TPA for STEMIs, the TIMI trials, EMS acquisition of EKGs, handheld ultrasound. But most of our listeners probably already know Dr. Topol because we skew toward a tech-enabled future of medicine. How should I be using AI clinicians? Here's the real reason I wanted Eric on the podcast since we launched a year ago. More than anyone else I've interviewed, Mark Cuban, Shiv Rao, Dr. Glockenflecken, I want to follow in Eric Topol's footsteps. He is the voice and the pulse of high-quality evidence in medicine and I think the future of our profession. He has stayed true to his mission throughout his career, and I've tried to do the same with my career, with MD Calc, with the NNT, and now with Off-Call, supporting big ideas and important conversations about where medicine is going. I don't just want to know what AI can do, I want to think about how it should do things. So today, I want to know what Dr. Topol thinks of all of this. Even if he may not have all the answers, he might help us figure out how to think about them clearly. Dr. Eric Topol, welcome to How I Doctor. Before we jump into today's episode, I want to give a huge shout out to our first ever How I Doctor podcast sponsor, Abridge. Abridge is the leading AI platform that drafts structured, clinically useful notes at the point of conversation. Clinicians remain in full control because they review and finalize every note. With Abridge, many clinicians report reclaiming time and reducing their documentation burden, myself included. I've been using Abridge in my role as a practicing emergency physician in San Francisco, and clinicians who use it report up to an 86% reduction in effort writing notes, a 78% reduction in cognitive load, and 70% decrease in after-hours documentation. The company was also founded by a physician and is completely dedicated to empowering clinicians, which is what makes them the perfect first sponsor for How I Doctor. If you aren't yet using Abridge, inquire with your IT department today or reach out at abridge.com/contact. Thank you, and now let's get to today's episode. Before we jump into the episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Evidently. Evidently is the clinical data intelligence platform built to help physicians harness the ocean of patient data they're drowning in every day. From chart summarization to AI-assisted note drafting and denial appeal support, Evidently makes sure the right data shows up at the right time. Physicians using Evidently report spending less time hunting through charts and more time focusing on patient care. That's why they've become a trusted partner to health systems looking to improve documentation, quality, and revenue sustainability. The company is led by providers and AI researchers that are dedicated to reducing documentation burden and helping clinicians practice at the top of their license. If you want to see what Evidently can do for your hospital or your practice, reach out today at www.evidently.com. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Well, Graham, thank you. That's an awfully kind introduction.
You write a lot about science, but I kind of want to ask you how you feel about this moment that we're in late 2025. You know, we have incredible medicines and technologies and AI, but the trust in, I think, our medical system feels worse than it's felt certainly since I started med school in 2003. How do you think about the optimism from the science side with the public's skepticism?
Yeah, you're bringing up such a critical issue. So when I got my first job was University of Michigan in cardiology, that was 85, so 40 years ago. And during these 40 years, we were doing pretty well, and then now we've hit bottom. And what you're bringing out here is that there's this dichotomy of the most impressive technology opportunities, the tools that we have to take medicine to plateaus and higher levels than we ever would have envisioned. And at the same time, we have anti-science, everything. So we have made it much more difficult to make the advances that we should be easily jumping ahead. And it's unsettling, it's vexing. I'm just hoping, Graham, that it's just a short-term story, and that the work that we're all doing to advance the field will be something that's unstoppable. It just needs a continued push, and we'll get back on track eventually.
Eric, do you see it as physicians or the system kind of needing to communicate better? Or is it really the proof is in the pudding that we really are going to see some of these transformational breakthroughs? People are going to see it for themselves and they're going to have to believe it.
Yeah, I think it's both. We're going to see more and more compelling evidence that there's a new way to practice medicine and a new way to achieve accuracy and humanistic care and all sorts of things that AI and other things that we have in the offing now can make a difference. But on the other hand, as physicians and as scientists, we don't do anything to neutralize the toxicity, conspiracy theories. I mean, a very small percent of us, perhaps 1%, are active on social media platforms trying to get the right word out.
I have to imagine that you are constantly sent papers and pitches and slide decks about the latest breakthroughs, and some of it certainly is real, and some of it is probably snake oil. How do you decide like what is hype and what is, hey, I should actually be paying attention to this? Your newsletter is always coming out with like, hey, there's a new technology that may help us in a year or 5 or 10 years or something like that. How do you personally decide what is worth you digging into and evaluating?
Well, because I'm old and have this 40-year span of evaluating things, and I've always been trying to think ahead and trying to get some kind of vision for how medicine will evolve as we go forward. So, like, for example, when I saw back in 2023, the first paper on these protein organ clocks, which we've never had the ability to judge the pace of aging of our organs in the body and our immune system. That really got me excited because it was a whole new look. Or when I saw data on a p-tau217, a inflammation marker in the blood that tells us many, many years in advance about whether a person's really at risk for Alzheimer's, and that we can modify it like an LDL cholesterol with interventions. These are things that just grab me. They just say, "Oh, wow!" But I read a lot every day and week, and I kind of have a feeling for what at least to me seems like something that represents something it could be impactful.
Physicians, we are so accultured into the way that we are trained to do things, and we never want to be we never want to be the first person to use a medicine, and we never want to be the last either. Like, how do you decide, like, yeah, maybe we are thinking about this wrong? Maybe more heart attacks are due to inflammation and aren't necessarily just like cholesterol plaque that is built up and ruptured and thrombosed. Like, what makes you be able to challenge your own kind of traditional medical thinking?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that I try to teach and emphasize to all of our young, trainees and students and even faculty, in that just keep challenging what is dogma. Our sacred cows in medicine are plentiful and
Yeah.
often can be shot down. So a perfect one is the example you just provided. So for all these years as a cardiologist, all we did was focus on narrowings and the so-called, that a name I made, the oculostenotic reflex, where you see a narrowing and then you put a stent
You
in,
gotta open it. Yeah.
do a bypass, And so turns out that's just a very small part of the story that we have been fixated upon. we still have a lot of heart attacks.
Yeah.
And most of them are not from critical narrowings, but rather that they have inflamed arteries and that we're not paying attention to that. They're not obstructive. And we can now pick them up. Certainly, we have in people who are suspicious because they're high risk. We can do a coronary CT angiogram and do AI of the epicardial fat around the vessel and say, oh, wow, this one's inflamed, even though there's no significant narrowing. Oh, wow, this patient has 3 arteries inflamed. So we really got to get all over this. So this is a whole new path in cardiology that we've ignored for decades. The high-risk patient and the vulnerable atherosclerotic non-obstructive plaque. But that type of questioning dogma is something that we should be doing like every day because, it's too many things we accept without adequate evidence.
I am curious how much you think stuff that we've either, whether it's like inflammatory component of STEMIs or stuff that we have always just called idiopathic is actually the immune system or its inflammation. And we just fundamentally, we're calling it idiopathic because we just don't know. That feels to me like it's a trend. Do you feel like that's going to get unearthed as well?
I do think that we can do much better to define these. Back in 2000, as you recall, in the early 2000s, we thought that the DNA genome sequence was going to unlock everything. That was our operating instructions. The problem is you can study the 6 billion nucleotides in a genome and you won't find out about the immune system. Because except in rare mutations associated with very rare diseases of the immune system, you have to do perturbations. You have to do special immune system assessments. And so we don't have that clinically. So like you're in the ER and you were thinking, well, this patient's immune system, maybe that's an explanation for what's going on here. There is no test that you can do. It's a joke. Here it is.
Yeah.
We're basically in 2026 now. And the only thing we have is a white cell neutrophil to lymphocyte ratio, which is a joke. So why don't we have, ability to look at T and B cell function, NK dendritic cells, antibodies, autoantibodies, T and B cell repertoire sequencing, interferons? They should be available, and they're not. So this is a real problem. Is the immune system's damn important, but we can't assess it in patients except in rare academic labs that they can do a comprehensive job. That's a big gaping hole in medicine today.
Well, it was interesting in the book that, you got access to all the coolest researchers that were, running like an immune panel on you to say, oh yeah, Eric Topol has had rhinovirus 15 times and you've had like Coxsackie 2, 3 times or whatever. It was interesting that those markers are like stuck in your body permanently, that those can be detected. Clearly opened the door to this idea that like these viruses are making their impact on us and leaving their footprints permanently.
Absolutely. When I found out I never had cytomegalovirus, CMV, that was really a stunner because most people have.
Yeah.
And that could be good or bad. I mean, we're seeing all sorts of things related to Epstein-Barr virus and now other viruses. And as you say, the link to pathogens is becoming more important than we ever had. That's another one of these dogmas that have to be, Alzheimer's, that can't have anything to do with an infection, well, yeah, guess what? I mean, look what happened when they challenged that peptic ulcer disease was due to H. pylori. Maybe we should be open-minded about these things.
Hey, today's episode is brought to you by Abridge. We all feel the weight of clinical documentation that follows us home and chips away at our personal time. With Abridge, clinicians can change that. Abridge drafts a structured, clinically useful note at the point of conversation, all seamlessly integrated into Epic and customizable to your specialty while you review and finalize every word. Clinicians have reported significantly less after-hours charting, improved satisfaction, and dramatically lower burnout. Let technology support your day instead of interrupting it. Visit abridge.com to learn how you can focus more on patient care and less on paperwork. Let's put the care back in clinical care. A quick word about today's sponsor, Evidently. Their platform turns an ocean of fragmented clinical data into concise, actionable insights. Chart summaries, note drafting, denial appeal support, HCC capture, so you spend time caring, not chasing. A transplant surgeon at a large academic medical center recently took transplant referral review from 2 hours to 20 minutes with AI-assisted chart review from Evidently. Physicians deserve workflows that improve accuracy, reduce exhausting chart biopsy, and help us practice at the top of our license. If you want to see how this might work in your hospital or your department, go to evidently.com. That's evidently.com to get started today. It feels like during COVID we lost the battle on like not doing viral swabs on people. I feel like society now expects you're going to get a flu and a COVID and RSV swab, like the triple swab when you go to the urgent care or something like that. And, part of me does wonder if there maybe would be value in doing the, 15 like extended comprehensive viral panel on people. Would we learn things from that or understand patterns with these people that we don't because we just assume, yeah, you've got some virus. I don't know what it is. And it doesn't matter. Maybe it does. I don't know.
Well, no, I think it does matter. One of the problems is we haven't had a very low cost, practical way, to get a comprehensive sweep of these viruses and pathogens to send it out. It takes weeks. It's very expensive. But we're moving to a point where it's going to be very inexpensive and practical. What you're bringing up is kind of a futuristic way that will bring in the mix of understanding pathogens. And one of the most exciting things in all of medicine today is achieving what we call, immune tolerance or tolerogenic approaches, where, like, for example, all these studies now have shown that if you have lupus, if you have dermatomyositis, if you have even multiple sclerosis, you can take the B cells with a T cell CD19 wipeout, and when the B cells come back, they don't attack the persons again.
Huh.
I mean, that it's basically in the chapter about controlling our immune system and super agent. That is shocking. You can reboot the immune system. Wow. And there's lots of other ways you can get tolerance with vaccines and whatnot. So our ability to measure the immune system is way behind our ability to control it. And then you have all these kooks out there that are taking rapamycin, at variable doses. They're telling everybody, take rapamycin, you'll live longer, you'll live healthier. Well, guess what? You could be under severe immunosuppression at low doses.
Yeah.
We have no way to measure it. And some of the biggest proponents of rapamycin, like Peter Attia and Brian Johnson, they stopped taking because they were getting all these infections.
Yeah.
Well, after they told millions of people they should all take rapamycin. I mean, so that shows you how bad our handle is on the immune system.
I wrote a review of Dr. Attia's book. Eric, it really felt like your book was like, I wrote this down, like an evidence-based outlive. Like, I think I fully agree with Peter Attia's point on health span instead of lifespan as being an important thing, and prevention, and keeping blood pressure and A1C down for a long time, and like those. In order to have a long health span, you have to do those things. But I really appreciated that you had just citation after citation and study after study explaining what's fact and what's fiction. And
yeah, I mean, I also, interviewed him and wrote a review of his book. And there were many good things in it.
Absolutely.
But there were many things in there which have gone completely off the rails. The rapamycin is one example, this overdose of protein that has no support, even though he's selling these David bars and all this stuff. And not even a mention of the potential benefits of GLP-1 drugs or the role of multimodal AI or, various things that we know are actually important or are emerging important. But yeah, there's so many things where I consider reckless in there. Total body MRI for everyone. Like, show me the data for that,
Well, Eric, you brought up GLP-1s. The data continues to come out about, X new condition, there seems to be some benefit to GLP-1s. I mean, like, should we all be on GLP-1s?
Yeah. I did approach that in the book, of course, and it's possible that's where we're headed, even for people who are not overweight. But we've seen, as you well know, the benefits various organs, not just weight loss, like the heart and the kidney and the liver, and we're seeing it for addiction and migraine, and we're testing it in long COVID right now in a large trial. We just finished enrollment of 1,000 participants in less than a month. Versus placebo. So I think you're onto something important. What I would emphasize is whatever we're seeing today with the two popular gut hormone mimetics, basically we have other 8 or 9 in the pipeline. And we have combinations of all these. Just saying, how many more and oral preparations. So we're just at the beginning of this GLP-1 gut hormone revolution in medicine. So as it goes forward, it's very possible that we'll land on something that would be helping everyone. But we'll see. I mean, it's much too early to know.
In your book, you've got a bunch of really good neologisms. You've got the welderly. You did a study of 1,400 people with, I think over 85 with no chronic disease, right?
And no medications, right?
And take no meds. I mean, I'll see these people occasionally in the ER, and it's like, oh, you haven't been seen in 10 years, and you still are healthy. But it is a little weird to see these people. You open their problem list, and it's kind of empty.
That was the best part, the chart review.
Yeah.
There was like no chart.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
It took 7 years to find these people.
Have they just kind of dodged every single bullet? Like they just have everything lined up where they had a good genetic predisposition. They had good probably habits around exercise and alcohol. And is that your theory of these people that like they kind of lucked out?
Well, it's great that you asked that. And, how do people get to 85 without these 3 age-related diseases? Because that should be our goal. We should be able to get
absolutely,
there.
Yeah.
And of course, if they get to that point, they have a lot of good years ahead of them as well. So the point here is that the whole genome sequence of these 1,400 people, they didn't show much at all.
I know. That didn't make any sense to me. I thought for sure there'd be something there.
When we did this was almost a decade investment of work. We were sure we would find the secrets of, so there's a small genomics contribution, much, much smaller than we had estimated. Then there's this luck point that you're bringing up. Sure, there's some random stochastic aspect. But I do think the lifestyle, which affects the immune system in a very big way, physical activity is so important. The good diets, sleep, and having social connections, having a purpose. These were people with really good, optimistic kind of attitudes, and they did all the things for the most part. Now, did we have exceptions? Sure. We had a 99-year-old guy who I'll never forget, who still was smoking 2 packs a day. That's, but most of them fit the healthy lifestyle.
Yeah.
But what I would say is the missing piece here appears to be this immune system story, because while we were doing that work, and only in recent years, have we seen that when you measure the immune system, that is the driver of healthy aging. So if you get there by lifestyle, great. If you get there by luck, great. But probably there's some things that we can do. Like, for example, giving shingles vaccine to people over 50. Who would have thought that would lead to 20 to 25% reduction of dementia and Alzheimer's disease, right? And it's probably because it gets our immune system in a much better state to avoid that immunosenescence. And I think that's the ticket for us to promote this healthy aging, super ager concept.
Yeah. Eric, I'm gonna transition us to a little bit about deep medicine and AI by asking you, are we all just pre-sick? Is there anybody that's actually healthy besides maybe these, this very small cohort of elderly patients? How do you think of that?
Well, we do have a very unhealthy population. And perhaps we're going to see, with the further reductions in cost and availability of the GLP-1 drugs for people who would benefit, we'll see some improvements of that profile, but the obesity and the diabetes is just so rampant in our population. No, I think the problem we have, 25% of Americans only have physical activity that's beating the bare minimum, the absolute lowest level. That means we have basically a sedentary population. How do we get them moving? That's what I'm thinking, Graham, is that we can't do that by just saying the same thing to all people. We've got to be able to, at the individual level, say, well, Graham, you are healthy right now, but our models show us that in 14.2 years, you're going to have a heart attack. Okay? We can do that now, which is wild. And this is how we're going to take these steps in you so that you're never going to have a heart attack. And maybe we have some indicators that when that specificity is used, that we'll have much better yield of people having durable changes in lifestyle, because they don't just come that one-off to you. You're going to see them again and say, oh, wow, look at this progress we've made. We've redone the models. And you know what? We don't see, there's no, so everything changes. The big difference now is prediction with AI, multimodal AI. It's not just if, yes or no. It's when. Who would have thought we could do that? So this is really an exciting change. And that's why, back when I wrote Deep Medicine, I thought our biggest thing in AI was going to be to relieve the data clerk burden of doctors, give patients more autonomy, get us the gift of time, and bring humanity back to medicine. I think that's starting to happen. But I think what's even bigger to me, much bigger, is that we have this newfound capacity to prevent these major age-related diseases. So instead of all this work that's being done to reverse aging, let's just accept aging, but don't accept that these diseases are obligatory part of aging, because they don't have to be.
I love that. That's a great reframing of aging as like, I guess, well, I'm another decade older. I guess I'll, by default have to pick up a few more diseases along the way. Eric, in Deep Medicine, you wrote it in 2019. I mean, that was 3 years before ChatGPT, which I think, opened the world's eyes to certainly generative artificial intelligence. You published a ton of trials and information in Deep Medicine that looked pretty darn good to me too. What's the honest assessment here? Like, are we on track? Is this just the pace of medical change? Or do you think there's, is there stuff that's holding us back from moving faster with artificial intelligence in medicine?
Yeah, there's a lot that could have been incorporated now that isn't. So when there's compelling evidence, like a mammogram, can be read with better accuracy when there's a radiologist and AI.
Yeah.
And this is like from 100,000 plus women randomized trials.
Yeah, these are not small studies at all.
No,
yeah.
There's 44 studies that compare machine vision during colonoscopy with a gastroenterologist versus just a gastroenterologist. Again, 25% more polyps, and a lot of these, of course, are really precancerous polyps. Now, we have lots more opportunities, of course, to improve accuracy. We're not using them. So, for example, another one with mammograms is if a woman gets a mammogram today and it's normal, there are 2 cleared FDA algorithms that will say, oh, no, it's not normal. There's a high risk of breast cancer in the next 3 to 5 years, which is a whole different way to proceed under surveillance when you know that. Do any women get that? No. They don't even know about it. They don't even know about what the AI reading could provide as far as accuracy. And that kind of is across the board for radiology. But what will it take? Well, we haven't seen a randomized, real-world medicine trial. So you could say, if you're a doctor today, you say, well, I'm waiting for compelling evidence. But, if I pick Waymo as the proof of superhuman performance.
I can probably look out my window and see one just right now. They're everywhere here in San Francisco.
Yeah. I mean, the data from Waymo, they've been very transparent about it. 93% reduction of significant car accidents. Wow. I mean, 40,000 deaths each year from car accidents, And if you could extrapolate that from Waymo's data of 120 million miles. So what we're seeing with that, which is, that's a pretty complicated thing about driving on roads and not, hitting anybody, killing anybody. So just think what that's going to look like when we roll this out fully in medicine. That's a precedent, and it is saving lives. But we have to give it time. Remember, that whole deal with Waymo, that took 12, 15 years.
Yeah.
And we are anxious to see, when is this going to get? Well, medicine moves slower than autonomous driving.
Yeah.
So this is a problem. Every single time I've tried to forecast what's going to happen in medicine, I'm off by many years, a decade. I might have got it right, but I got the wrong year or when this is going to finally arrive.
We surveyed over 1,000 physicians. About 67% of them are using AI daily. Now, obviously, we're going to skew more towards, kind of tech-enabled physicians, and almost all of them, I think like 85% say it makes them better at their job, but about 80% are not satisfied with their employer's AI adoption.
Yeah.
And so I wonder how much of it is, that friction there between the individual and the kind of health system, how much of that is liability, risk, cost?
Yeah. So the health systems, of course, cost of these models to use is one issue, but also not that many. A lot of these have been researched at the tech titans like Google DeepMind and Microsoft. They haven't even gotten them through FDA for commercial use. A lot of startups have, but they also charge a lot. So that's one issue. And just like the ambient conversations made into notes and taking on a lot of these administrative data clerk tasks, that costs money to the health system to do it. So that's one thing. Liability, yes. But I think the other problem is, for the most part, we have to get this evidence solidified, because a lot of the evidence of using widespread Gen AI in patient management communication is not in the real world. It's with patient actors and with these, CPCs of the New England Journal and these cases. And we got to get some hard evidence. I hope we get that soon, because that's going to help propel the field forward.
And I've seen data that it really does need to be drilled down to at least the specialty level. Like, you can get pretty decent. I mean, this was probably a year ago. There was a study showing pretty decent responses to multiple choice questions for internal medicine, cardiology, nephrology, whatever it was, but then switched to anesthesiology or pediatrics, and these models were, 3 times worse. And so it really does depend on their training data. We really probably are going to have to do these at multiple validation levels too.
Yeah, and you also brought up another point, which is the training in AI. So what was interesting is Pranaj Rajpurkar and I wrote a op-ed in the New York Times, and it was about the 7 studies that the AI for performance alone was compared to the doctor with AI. And all 7 of these studies, the AI did better than the doctor with AI. I mean, who would have predicted that? Now, is that because clinicians are not trained with AI? Is it because they have a bias against AI and they have, this automation negativity? What's going on here? There's one other point to make here. We doctors make lots of mistakes and errors, and we don't acknowledge that. And we're holding AI to a different level of account. AI is not allowed to make any error. Well, if we wait that long, we're going to miss the opportunity, because we have 800,000 or so diagnostic errors a year in the U.S., as the Johns Hopkins group has documented, of permanent disability or death. I mean, we're not just talking about the 12 million errors. We're talking about how many got disability or death. I mean, this is horrible. So we do need help. We do need help. And, the gift of time will help some, because then you think about stuff more. But if you have an AI to work with that you understand its limits and its benefits, that's going to help a lot too.
You wrote in I think superagers, actually. You said, we realized we had stumbled across a shocking realization. Everything was personal. And so, you are like such a renowned evidence and evidence-based medicine guy. How do we draw conclusions or predict things if everything starts to just get unique and individualized, right? We have, for decades, we have, lumped patients together so that we can draw conclusions from cohorts of people. And so we say, oh, well, this, the blinded, randomized, double blind controlled trial showed that this group of people who got statins had this outcome, and this group who got the control had this other outcome. How do we do that when everything starts to become personalized?
We've relied on randomized trials as the best solid evidence. And when you think about these trials and the number needed to treat, let's say you did a trial of intervention, in thousands of participants, and you had a 30% reduction of death,
Sure.
or something big, right? And you say, oh, wow, that's fantastic. Okay, well, our randomized trials, first of all, they're skewed of who gets into the trials. But even moreover, what about the 70% who didn't get benefit? And that benefit of 30%, that may be from going from, 4 to 3 or whatever, a small amount. What about, almost all the people in the trial who had no benefit? So it's a very fuzzy way to nail down whether intervention works. And we accept that.
Yes.
Now, what I'm submitting is that's with treating people with kind of undifferentiated. And then, we'll do these subgroup analyses. And, then you got small numbers, what the hell it means. What about if we had the full stack of data for each person?
Yeah.
We had their electronic health records, all of them, not just the one provider. We had their labs. We had the AI of their labs, which picks up things even in the normal range that we as clinicians dismiss. We have their retina that picks up everything, the whole body. We have their organ clocks. We have their polygenic risk scores, their genome sequence, their environmental exposure. So we're going to have that. We are getting to a point, including the immune system, where we'll have a stack of data. And we're going to say, with multimodal AI, you're at risk for this and that. You will benefit from this or that. So we're moving to a different type of medicine. It isn't going to be treating, randomized trials will still exist. They'll still be useful. But like for these natural experiments, the natural experiments I mentioned, like for shingles, and there's many other examples, there's no randomization. There's just huge numbers of people that just happen to get this intervention, one day off or whatever, and of their birthdays. So
Right.
we have other ways to learn. I mean, someday we're going to have digital twins. We're going to have 1 billion people around the world with their stack of data. And we're going to say, Graham, we found your twins. We found your nearest neighbors that are just like you.
Yeah.
They're replicas of you. And this is what happened in their life. And this is what helped them. This is what hurt them. These are new ways that only became possible with stacks of data for each person.
This is the biggest question that I have, my biggest worry, and I honestly don't know the answer to it. So I'm hopeful you have a way to at least think about this. You wrote, I think in Deep Medicine, you wrote the machine will see things humans will never see.
Yes.
In the ER, I rely on my gestalt all the time. It's not just the vital signs. It's not just the way the patient eyeballs, but like the general sense of like, I think there might be something really bad going on here. How does that work with today's med students, today's pre-med students, as they start to go through their medical training, if the AI kind of starts to give them the answer immediately?
Yeah, you're bringing up a really important concept. In the New Yorker today, there was an article, Are We Getting Stupider?
Sure, yes.
And
yes.
also de-skilling or non-skilling, Yeah, so that ability to assimilate a person's story and data, that's, the essentiality of medicine. But I think it can be improved with, augmented with help of AI, so you don't miss anything. Because we are not good at, pulling in all the data. It's just too many clicks on too many pages. And, how do you go out to other providers' data and look at every lab data point? That's not our power. Our power, though, is conveying, communicating with patients and that wisdom and judgment and, and oversight. So I think ultimately, they will complement it. But I am concerned about young people getting de-skilled or never unskilled in that way. Yes. And there's even evidence of that among gastroenterologists already with this, at least one study. So this is something we've got to keep an eye on. It's part of the threat of AI in general, not just in medicine, of course.
Yeah. And then, Eric, my last question. Are doctors cooked? Are we hosed in the long term in 20, 30, 50 years, maybe, right around the time I retire? I mean, what is the role of the human physician? Will AI make us better, or will it make us an obsolete profession?
Well, I'm very optimistic, of course, and I do think it's going to make this profession extraordinary. They're going to have much more accuracy. We're going to have much more of a humanistic, way and rebuild the patient-doctor relationship that's suffered. And I do think that our prevention, to me, the biggest thing is that we will go into primary prevention, which we've never done in any real and meaningful way. We couldn't do it. I think we have the ticket to do that. So I see medicine going forward that clinicians and doctors should not be threatened. Eventually, we're going to be loving this. But of course, we in medicine have been completely onto the treatment side. Treat. And our treatments are generally not that great. They're often very expensive. They have side effects, and they're often too late, like cancer. Treat Alzheimer's when you have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. No. Treat somebody with heart failure or heart attacks. No. We have to shift to prevent. And we cannot do that with our current human limitations as clinicians. We need help. We have the help that's emerging now. And so that's why I'm so excited about the future. So,
the more I use AI, the more I feel the same way you do. I mean, the more I understand these tools, the less scared of them I am, and the more I understand where my place will be to continue to help patients as well.
Yeah, it's what a great asset to have, to use. And, patients are afraid of AI, many of them, because they don't really understand where it comes into play. There's a backlash right now because of the fears and children, teens killing themselves with from chatbots that are run amok. I mean, there are some definite scary things going on right now. I get that, but it's still in the early innings here. So we have to be patient and methodically, hardcore evidence, and just plod through this, and we will get there.
Well, Eric Topol, thank you so much for joining me today. Really, it was an absolute honor to have you on the podcast today.
Well, thank you. You've asked some of the best questions ever for me, and I've really enjoyed our conversation. Keep up the great work you're doing.
Likewise, thanks. Thanks for joining me today. For interviews with physicians creating meaningful change, check out offcall.com/podcast. You can find How I Doctor on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll have new episodes weekly. This has been and continues to be Dr. Graham Walker. Stay well, stay inspired, and practice with purpose.